Alrighty, buddy.
Hello, hello.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Welcome back too.
Thank you. So it is 8/16, 1st of February.
That's right.
And today we figured we'd take it pretty easy. We've been talking about some pretty heavy stuff, but this is a topic we both have a long relationship with.
Yes.
We're going to talk about Magic the Gathering.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me how you got into Magic, buddy.
Oh man, I remember my friend when I was 8 years old gave me a bunch of red cards. It wasn't even a full deck. It was like 20 or 25 cards, and that's how I learned how to play. It was just old school red cards, and the biggest card in the deck was Fireball.
Nice
Fireball,
card.
yeah, it's a good card. So that's how I remember getting into Magic. And then, slowly you meet different kids who play it, and then eventually you became a teenager and started playing with other people too. How about you, man? How'd you get into it?
Roughly similar to you, I moved to the U.S., of course, in 2004.
Mm-hmm.
So I was 8 years old, and I met a longtime friend, Rafa.
Oh, yeah.
And he played, and he introduced me to it, and we learned the rules of the game together.
Nice.
And what do you remember? What sort of you remember any specific cards other than Fireball from those?
Yeah, there was. Oh man. It was the time of Mirrodin.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So one of them was.
We're the same age, so of course.
Exactly. When we were 8, it was Mirrodin that was out, or that block, Darksteel. I remember all the Archbound cards.
Archbound, yeah.
Archbound. The little robots that could move 1/1 counters.
Yep.
Onto
Modular,
others.
I think.
Modular's ability, exactly. And of course, I remember Darksteel Colossus.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big deal back then, if I remember correctly.
11 for 11.
11 for 11 is indestructible. How about you? What are some cards you remember right off the bat?
Well, my first card, I don't think I can even remember his name, but my friend gave me the card. It was an ogre, 5 mana, I think, 3/3 ogre. And whenever it's blocked by artifact creature, it destroys it.
That's pretty good.
No, it's pretty bad, but
That's pretty good for back then.
But yeah, it was basically you just didn't block it with artifact creatures unless you didn't read the
But some
person's
people
card.
were playing all artifacts at that point.
It's true. Artifact creatures were pretty bum.
Excuse me.
Unfortunately, paying even creatures were weaker in those days, and even paying that much mana for 5 mana 3/3 is a rough time.
Mm-hmm.
But I still have that card somewhere. It got folded at one point, so it's got a crease in it.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's in a sleeve for
To commemorate.
more so I can spot it in the collection with relative ease. But
Nice.
so what you started playing Magic then, and then did you just play with this one guy, or?
Yeah, at first it was just this one guy, and then slowly it was like some other kids who knew how to play. I would teach some people how to play. Most of my friends weren't really interested, but a couple were, so they'd learn how to play. They get their own decks.
Because you were living that homeschool life, so it was a
That's
little
right.
harder to encounter human beings.
That's right. Yeah, there was a few of us. So it was a homeschooling kid who taught me how to do it, and then we would play. We'd actually.
Because for those of you who don't know at home, there's like a homeschooling crew. And
it's like a cult. No, I'm joking. Partially. In the U.S., homeschoolers are very cultish, or tend to be, but here it's a little different in downtown Toronto. But yeah, so we had a crew of homeschoolers, and we do our stuff at home, but we'd also meet up like once a week and hang out basically and do activities, and that's where we like play Magic and stuff like that. But I mostly until I got a little older, until I was like 12, I didn't play with anybody. Any strangers or anything. I didn't go to any events. It was just mostly with kids. How about you? Like, do you remember like when you went to a first event or anything like that?
Dude, there are a couple moments before that. one of the things I remember is at the school that me and Rafa and some of the other guys were at that point. We went to a couple of schools together, and I think my last one in the US or the second last one, it was they had a weird setup on the day. They had like 7 periods, but one of them was a club period.
Okay.
So we formed a magic club.
Oh, that's awesome.
We would just sit and play magic.
That's great.
And I remember that, or we probably didn't even form it. They might have even had it already. I can't even remember. Regardless of how it occurred, we found this place, and there were a couple other kids there. And that was the first time I encountered a kid who actually went to game stores and tried things out and played games. And then I think the first time I actually went to a store and tried to play a deck was after we had... Maybe I'm messing up the timeline a little bit. I can't remember if it was the first time I went was here in Canada or was down in the States. Because when I was a kid growing up, I would split time between the States and Canada.
Right.
Right. Did you spend much time in the States as a kid? 'Cause
yeah.
Your dad's.
My mom and my dad as well were working on in Tucson, Arizona, so they'd go there over the summers.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd go and spend like 3 months there with them growing up often. That's actually where I remember playing my first event, which was fun. What was your first event like? Do you remember it?
I'm struggling to separate out which one was exactly the first.
Fair enough. Yeah.
There's one that I remember, almost undoubtedly my first constructed event, was this event that happened right after me and some of the other friends down there had done a draft. And, we got 7 or 8 kids together, and we had opened, it was Shards of Alara packs. But it wasn't actually Shards of Alara. It was one of the sets deeper into it.
Okay.
Conflux. It was Conflux.
Okay.
Because it had tons of different multicolored cards. And we all drafted horrendous decks, and but my deck took me to the finals. Mostly luck. Where I lost to one other kid.
Second place though. That's not
place. Bad. And didn't know the rules. Could hardly play at that point.
Right.
It was certainly not a good draft for anybody involved.
Right.
But a lot of fun. And me and my friend took. Yeah, you can have some of that. Go for it. Me and my friend took our draft decks, and we put cards in them until they were 60 cards, just of what we had lying around. And then we went to a standard event and got absolutely hosed by people who were playing real decks.
Right.
And that was my first sort of experience with a standard metagame. And the metagame back then was actually kind of a nifty 5-color control deck. That was like
the Lara thing, right?
That was the best deck, and there were some aggro decks that could take games off of it. There were like a mono white deck and some other stuff. With a Johnny.
So powerful back then, yeah.
And that was... Because we were drafting Conflux, but I'm pretty sure that wasn't the most current set at the time. That's such a long time ago.
Yeah, it was a while ago. Like, there was a Lara Reforged, or Reformed or something.
What was your first event like?
So I was in Tucson, and I remember I was 12 years old. It was the summer before I turned 13, and I went and I was playing a 5-color dragon deck because I thought that was really cool, with all of the dragons from Planar Chaos. So like Oros and they all attack, and then you pay mana and they do stuff. So I thought this was gonna be a great deck. It was super fun. I went and I got completely wrecked, of course. But the thing that stands out most in my memory was, it was this weirdest standard event I've ever been to, but one of there it is.
Sorry, everyone at home.
That's okay. Sorry about that. We forgot about that one. We're a little tired today. But one guy. There was a bunch of old dudes. They're probably like our age now or older. They were kind of seedy, and one of them bet another one to. There was a dead mouse in the backyard, in the back of the game store, and one of them bet the other to put it in the microwave. And so this idiot took the dead mouse and put it in styrofoam and put it in the microwave, and then just this horrible smell just permeated the entire game store. It was disgusting, and they had to it was horrible. They threw the microwave out. There was a huge fight about it, and they basically just kicked him out, And they were really apologetic, and they were like, "Oh, I didn't think he was gonna actually do it when I bet him." And I was like, "What are you guys doing?" So anyway, that was really funny. That was my first.
And then you were hooked for life.
That was hooked for life.
That was what you were gonna do.
It was like, this is the rush, man. Danger. So exactly. So that was my first event.
Memorable. Yeah. No, I don't think anything that crazy happened on my first one.
But you weren't in Tucson, Arizona. So.
I wasn't in Tucson. That's for sure.
Do you remember when you were in Toronto, and you're more firmly or regularly going to games, because we were going to games and stuff together, but also separately. Did you have a favorite location that you would go to?
Oh yeah, for sure. No, so I got a bit of an allowance, which I spent almost entirely on Magic cards.
Ta-da! Yeah, me too.
But it was $20. And first I would go to the Silver Snail, and I would just sort of buy random packs or something, or a couple cards that I like looks up. But at a certain point in grade 9, I think, I discovered that there were good local drafting places. I think Zoe, who we both remember, took us around and showed us these places, showed us Harry Tarantula and 401 Games.
Right.
And said that 401 Games was the place. And at that time, I was almost undoubtedly right. In part, there's just weren't very many places. Harry T ran the occasional event.
Yep.
There was another place up north called Dueling Grounds.
Yeah, that was on the west side.
Exactly.
Yep.
But that was the times I went there. It was, in that time, it was a softer place in terms of just the competition that you were coming against and how regularly people drafted. And over the years, I figured out that part of the deal was just the way that prizing works. So at the time, I wouldn't. I've had my falling outs with 401 at this point, and I'm not really interested in drafting there for all sorts of reasons. But there's no need for us to get in that particular negativity, other than to say that nowadays, as we touched on, I think we might have touched on this before. Yes, of course, in the gaming
in
cast,
the gaming one, yeah.
There's just way more competition.
Yeah.
So do you remember going to 401 the first time?
I did go to 401, and I remember the first time I went up there, it was in that dingy third floor.
Yeah, buddy.
Tiny space that they crammed 20 sweaty dudes into all the time, or however many it was, and it was fun,
I remember when we got an air conditioner up there.
Yeah,
that was cash.
Seriously, but I mostly went to Dueling Grounds, so I was weird. I was the opposite. Yeah, soft, exactly.
I'm just kidding.
No, it's true, because I didn't do drafts as much. I did a few drafts, but I more did the standard event, and I would try to do the standard event. I couldn't afford all the cards, but I would try to bring my own deck each time and just see what happened. I didn't ever do ridiculously well, but I did okay, and that was kind of part of the fun.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. No, I had a very limited collection. Even with because most of the money I spent early on was just on things that I was interested in,
right?
And not guided by what would be the most fiscally responsible Magic thing to do. But drafting early on sort of hooked me just because of the basic idea that you were on sort of an even ground with the people. I'd been to standard events, I'd been Shrek'd. The appeal of that was less to me because I knew that I wouldn't be able to get enough money to make the best deck. And I had gotten interested on the side of reading Magic content. And in the early days, the major source of Magic content was what is colloquially known as the mothership, was just magicthegathering.com.
Right.
Nowadays, that's definitely not the case. There are tons of better places you can go. There's still MagicTheGathering.com for some stuff, but
Right.
there's just better sites now.
Yeah, stuff that more focus on the metagame. No, that's cool because I wasn't really researching it. It was still more casual for me when I was growing up. I didn't really have that hedge. But I remember, like, because you had been doing all this research, there was this one time when we were late in high school that, oh man, what was it for? I think it was for like Corset or something.
It was, yeah, I remember what you're talking about.
For Corset, and you said, okay, draft white, Nolan. And I was like, okay, I drafted white, and I got all the way to the finals. But it was that old dude. Remember that? There was one old dude who always came to 401. He looked like he was like 65 years old, and he always wore like a baseball cap and some flannel. Nice dude, but he was the best. And I didn't beat him, but I came second place, and I won like $25 store credit, and I was so happy.
Yeah, buddy. No, that was... there was a real... It's the thing that... I said I wouldn't get into it, but it's the thing that basically breaks my heart about 401 is that they had the best people. And for whatever reason, the scene, like, sort of existed in this weird place where, like, on basic levels, like, I understand how these sort of things do. They just don't make the store owner much money. Right. And it's kind of a labor of love. But a game store is a labor of love.
Oh, absolutely, 100%.
They're not big money makers. No. But the community never got support, and people would just get sick and tired of like asking for stuff or just trying to get things done and it just not being done. And in my time, I saw sort of 2 or 3 rotations of just core groups of players, and I was playing there solid for 3 or 4 years or something, if not longer. And you'd see these groups of guys move in, they'd play regularly. And they get sick and tired of being there. And when I was a kid, I just didn't understand that because I wasn't at that level yet. But it's a real shame. If they'd done things differently, then they could have had a real solid community there. And Magic has only gotten bigger, so it would have been a real boon to the city.
Absolutely.
In terms of that little subculture.
Definitely. And their space is nice now. They moved.
Yeah, they've moved up north. I'm just not interested in returning anymore.
No, for sure. But you went to face to draft, right? The one on the Danforth a couple times.
Yeah, I've been there a couple times.
How was that?
It was fine. I mean, again, I draft. There's other stuff you can do. There's just basic stuff that rubs me the wrong way about places these days. And I understand that it's hard. Packs cost more money these days. But you can always raise the price of admission a little bit. And that way you can actually give prizes that matter to the people who play and draft. And I have not found a place in Toronto right now that's willing to do that. And the price that drafters want is more drafts. That's all. If you give me even half a draft worth of store credit for winning a draft, then every 2 drafts I get a free draft.
No, exactly. And that's part of the fun.
Yeah, exactly. So the structure they had at 4-1 was you would play 4 rounds, and then everybody who was 3-1 or better, 3-1 and 4-0, would get store credit proportional to the pool. Right. And that was fair. Yeah. And that meant that if you went there on big nights where there were lots of people and you did well,
you could get like $30-$40 or store credit sometimes.
That would be a ton. Yeah, maybe not 25 was like pretty much the cap. But a draft cost $15. Right. And a lot of the times you could make a draft back. It would take you required about 16 people to get a draft back. Right. But sometimes you would stack it up and you get like 32 people, and that's when you get that like big $25 payout.
You can get $10 profit and all your cards.
But the fact that just seems to have phased out. There doesn't seem to be anybody doing stuff like that anymore.
And of course now with the pandemic,
nobody's doing physical Magic anymore, and game stores everywhere are probably busted for good. But I'm hopeful. Like again, for this sort of industry, it's always been a labor of love. Yeah. So
No, exactly.
There's hope it'll return.
There is, and they seem to be like still open. In Toronto was a good store. There was a bunch of stores that at least sold Magic cards and sold singles if they didn't hold events, and a bunch of those are still around.
It's true.
But I think
the space to hold events is
really hard, and there's only a couple. And Dueling Grounds got priced out. They moved out of the city.
Damn, I didn't know that.
They're not here anymore. So that one's gone. That was a big institution.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what's interesting is like, you know, in our neighborhood there's the Far Side, the bar that holds events, and these aren't.
Yeah, that's nice. I mean, I would. They're if they could do draft stuff, then I'd be super excited.
Exactly. They look like they were just doing Commander, but they probably. I think like, you know, that's kind of cool. Even if they're not F&M sanctioned, you know, if they could just have like an informal draft night or something like that, enough people, and you kind of, their community spaces so they could organize that sort of thing.
It's nice to see casual Magic being played more.
Mm-hmm.
Arena. So let's talk about Arena for a bit.
Yeah.
So how'd you come across Arena, buddy? Because you started playing it first.
Yeah, so someone told me about it. I was actually at Kilgore's, one of our old spots, in the annex where Gabe used to live. It was not far from where I used to live, and it was just as we moved in together. Like I think it was still in September, and a guy said, you know, and he was like, "Oh, do you play Magic at the bar?" And I said, "Yeah, I do." He said, "Do you play Arena?" And he was like, "No, you should." Oh, and I said, "No." And he said, "Oh, you should get on Arena. It's really fun. You know, you get a bunch of cards." For free, and it's just a way to play online. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna go try it out. I went and did it, and then I put in the codes that he suggested I put in. I got all the cards, and then I was like, oh, guys, you want to check this out?
Yeah. At the time, of course, they had only a Windows client, and I'm a Mac dude, so
right.
I couldn't join in, but you and Janine got into it, and that's how Janine learned how to play Magic.
That's right.
That's our roommate, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it was cool to show her, and in my opinion, you know, my friend today, who an old friend of mine, he just is getting into Magic now, and I told him, listen, just play the tutorial on Arena, because the tutorial is actually really good. It does teach you how to do things, so it seemed to work for him. But,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I must say, even though it's not a substitute for playing in real life, it is fun to play people on Arena.
Totally, yeah. No, I've got Arena now. They've released the Mac client. And I miss I find it hard to take it as seriously as I should.
Totally.
And I miss the actual sort of mental side of sitting down across from somebody. Sometimes in very primitive ways, you know. Like, there's a guy across from me, he's playing slowly.
Right.
In real life, there are ways that you can interact with him that both pass the time.
Right.
Figure out why he's playing slowly.
What he's doing, exactly.
Online, you know, they could be making lunch. Like, sometimes I play slowly. It's usually because I'm just doing something else at the same time.
No, it's true. Absolutely.
And I feel like a jerk, but it's like everybody's doing it. So what am I supposed to do?
And it's kind of interesting that Arena really, you know, I think saw a blossom during this, and a boom during this pandemic, I'm sure.
Totally,
I think everybody migrated onto it, you know, just like we did. But it is rough because it's, you know, I can't, you know, the last time we played a paper game of Magic was at least a month and a half ago. You know? So it's you know, it's sad in that way.
No, and I do greatly prefer paper Magic.
For sure.
I would love, like, when this knock on wood, when this Corona stuff is over. You know, it would be great to just get together a group and do a draft.
Do a draft, exactly.
It's fun to go to a place and draft as well. But,
absolutely.
You know, if you're, like, frankly, if I have to go to a place and then draft and then risk not, well, it's not even a risk. Like, there's so little gain at the draft places that I'm aware of. You know, the thing that actually bothered me the most, I think, about the Dueling Grounds thing was they have a rewards card, but it's impossible for you to get rewards if you only draft. You could never get a full draft pack if you're only drafting.
No, it was not good.
So it gets you like a frustratingly stupid amount away from it. I think you need like 2,000 points to draft or something, and if you fill in all the draft slots, then you get like 1950 points. It's just like, Yeah.
What are you guys doing?
Come on, guys. And that's like 12 drafts, and they won't even give you one draft back.
No, it's ridiculous.
And if you're winning on Arena,
Yeah.
you're winning drafts back.
No, you are. Yeah, absolutely.
Can't.
And I've spent a little bit of money on Arena. Like I've probably spent $40 total
I was
buying
probably
gems.
some 20.
Good for you, man. I did a binge over Christmas where I bought a bunch of gems and just played a bunch of drafts.
Yeah, that's how they get you.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I got a good backlog of gems now, so I hope
That's
they'll be
good.
alright.
You don't need to do it.
But I can see the appeal for new players. There are places where Arena really fails to me.
Yeah.
It feeds very closely into a vision of Magic that I don't really agree. So
Yeah.
now I think So I was very attached into the metagame.
Right.
So give me your impressions of how Magic as a game has like changed over time.
Yeah, I mean, you're better at this than me because you kind of were studying the metagame longer than I was. I definitely think, but I do have some sort of instances that I noticed. I definitely noticed power level.
You
changing.
actually played Standard a lot.
Yeah, I
so
played Standard a lot, so power level has changed a lot.
How would you...
I think, like, I remember there being, like, one or two really good cards, each Standard, that were just nuts, but they weren't insane, and I remember, oh, man, I just remember it kind of being interesting where you could still show up with something that was a bit of a brew,
Totally.
and you do okay, you know? You could still, like, go 2-0, and maybe a bit more than that, 2-2.
Yep.
Or maybe a bit more than that. I really don't think that's possible in the current meta game. I have a standard deck on Arena, so which is standard right now since nobody's playing in person.
Mm-hmm.
And there are two or maybe three that work, and the rest are absolute shit. The rest you can't even bring them to the table, And the matchup, and I also seem to remember the matchups being a little more balanced. It was a little bit more up in the air. Like if this deck faced this deck, it didn't. One had an edge, but it wasn't necessarily
70-30.
Yeah, it's something and nowadays.
60-40.
Yeah, exactly, something like that. And nowadays it seems like I know if I have my mill deck or the rogue mill deck, that's the one I currently rock that likes to mill cards off the top of the deck. It shreds the green red deck. Like
you see those cards coming to play and you're like,
yeah, I know what to do. Exactly, it's over. 9 times, literally about 8 times to 9 times out of 10 that I play that matchup. They'll win occasionally if I don't get my cards in a line, but.
And in terms of just play, there is one huge difference, obviously, between Arena and real life, and that's best of 3.
Yes.
You are only playing best of 1s on
That's
Arena.
Right. That's it.
Which is way more explosive.
Yeah.
Like your decks are sort of forced to be focused for a single game.
Definitely.
And your reward for splitting matchups is way less.
Absolutely.
Because you just want to slam them.
No, for sure. What have you noticed? Like, because you did draft, that was your thing, and like, what do you notice from old school draft to drafting nowadays?
Oh, great question. So overall, there's one piece that affects both draft and constructed,
right?
And that is the change in power level between permanents and non-permanents. In the old days, I'm going to call them non-permanent spells,
right?
Even though that's technically wrong. There's rules in here. I can't make them stop. In the old days, spells were way better.
Yeah.
So removal was way better.
Right.
Drawing cards was way better.
Yeah.
Counter magic was way better.
Yeah.
If you were casting a spell, you were doing something.
Right.
And in draft, that had an effect because it meant that the best spells were really fought over.
Right.
And things like splashing a particular color just for a piece of removal was totally
acceptable. Absolutely.
You could pick up even early sort of the M core sets. You could pick up a Doomblade or something.
Yep.
And throw some swamps in your deck and play a Doomblade.
No, it's true. There's a couple swamps in there and you're good.
But over time, and creatures were just worse.
Right.
And over time, permanents and creatures have just gotten better and better.
Right.
And there was a really rough time starting, I think, around Return to Ravnica, where instant sorcery spells they just got worse. They were really slammed really hard all of a sudden. It started a little bit in Innistrad, but Innistrad was a great set, so people didn't really notice as much, especially from a draft perspective. They got absolutely slammed, and it took them a while to realize that this meant that people just played creatures all the time.
Right.
Because creatures are just hands down the best permanent.
Right.
Like you play a creature, you just get to attack people every turn.
Yeah, exactly.
You play an artifact, it sits there and it does a lame effect.
Right. So then the emphasis kind of started to change on heavier hidden creatures that did a bunch of shit. I noticed increasingly like creatures act like spells more than they did before. They have, multiple effects. They have choices. They have different things you can do with them. You know? That wasn't there before.
No, because that was the only way you... Because now they're in this... They're like Magic as a metagame is sort of struggling with this identity it's created for itself.
Right.
Where it is battling with the fact that it's focused so much on creatures.
Right.
It's given spells a bit more power, and they're slowly like edging up.
Right.
But they've made creatures so good that you need to put more stuff on creatures to make them better.
Right.
It's the reason I think it's like a fundamental issue with how they're designing the game. It's like they've made this like catastrophic mistake, and now they have to figure out some way to fix it in the future. Because creatures are amazing in principle.
Right.
Spells in general are just bad in principle.
Right.
Right. You play an instant, it does an ability and it leaves.
Right.
You play a creature, it stays on the board and it kills your opponent.
And it does something cool now.
And now it does something cool on top of that.
Yeah.
So I think, let's back up and I'll try and answer your original question, which is how draft has changed over time. This sort of falls into the same kind of thing. Because creatures have gotten better over time, cards in draft have generally gotten better over time too. So the place I really feel this is in a set like Innistrad, which is one of my favorites. I love Innistrad. Great draft format. Tons of really solid creatures. A bunch of really solid spells as well, but tons of really solid creatures.
Right.
It had a tribal theme going on, so it's kind of like Lorwyn. But just sort of, you can get just a bunch of solid stuff, and you are rewarded immensely for drafting synergistic decks.
Right.
But if you just draft solid cards, then you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Do you remember Scars of Meriden?
I didn't draft that too much, but I do remember a little bit. But you would have much more to say on that one than I did.
So the big thing about Scars of Meriden, they made a couple of just basic mistakes again. That fucked the whole format. This division between infect and artifacts really messed things up. The basic issue of that format was the cards were just bad. There were certain cards that were good, and you picked those good cards, and you kept rolling on. There's this funny video somewhere on the internet. Did you watch any tournaments early on?
Not really. No, I didn't. Once again, I didn't really get into the scene too much.
Of course,
in the same way that you did. But no, go ahead. Yeah.
Of course, there's funny. There's this. It's so funny as somebody who actually drafted. It was just hilarious because what they do is they take a great player. I forget. It's like Gabriel Nassif or something. He's like a legend.
Right.
And they hand him a pack, and they're like, "Open this pack." And so he takes the pack and he opens it up, and they're like, "Okay, what do you draft out of this pack? What's your first pick?" And he flips open the pack, and there's 15 cards in the pack. It is basically 14 terrible cards, and then it's a 6-mana 4/6 mythic. It's Consecrated Sphinx.
Whoa!
Consecrated Sphinx for. Do you remember what it does?
No, what does it do?
Consecrated Sphinx is a 6-mana 4/6 flyer. Whenever your opponent draws a card, you draw 2 cards.
What the fuck? Excuse me. What the hell? That's crazy. That's an insane card.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like there's this bomb creature that just like annihilates everything. It's probably one of the best cards in the whole set. And then the rest of the pack, and he's just like, well, you could you take this card because it's the best thing. And in part, it's just luck, right?
Right.
They picked a random pack. But that was kind of what it was like drafting
There's
Scars.
one card, you know.
Yeah, you were lucky to have, you know, sort of 4 or 5 really solid cards in the pack. And then the rest of the pack, you were just putting Chafe in your deck.
And it makes sense. Like, we were drafting Zendikar the other day, and I've drafted a ton of Zendikar now.
Zendikar
Rising.
Excuse
me. Yeah, not the old Zendikar. Zendikar Rising, so the newest Zendikar. And it's fun. But part of the issue with it that I've noticed, and I've drafted it tons, and I've tried pretty much every single combination.
Yeah,
you know, there is one way that just works better than all the rest.
Yep.
You know, and it is so. For example, and for me, it's like, you know, one of the big things with Zendikar was landfall. Landfall was a huge of the first Zendikar set. When you play a land, some cool stuff happens. They really lost that. It's a mechanic that's in the draft, but you don't. It's really hard to draft a proper landfall deck. The stuff that gets land onto the field is not great. You know, there's a couple cards, and then it's like, that's really unfortunate. You know, because it feels like then it's increasingly every time I draft it, it's like I'm looking for black white, because I know black white is the archetype that's gonna win. You know, and if I'm doing anything else, it's gonna be blue white, and then I usually don't do quite as well. You know.
Yeah, I mean you know, like you remember Theros.
Yeah.
Theros, what's the name again?
Theros Beyond Death.
That's the one. Yeah. I was really disappointed when they started. I mean, Scars of Mirrodin was just bad, but when they keep on going back to the same plane, oh god, it just confuses me. I can't remember the stupid names, but Theros Beyond Death. Do you remember that format?
Yeah.
What were the best colors?
Black and white, right?
Now, that was a totally different deck with a totally different theme.
Yeah.
But again, you know, and those colors just seem to be just miles better than anything else.
Yeah.
If you could get that deck,
it was great.
You would just annihilate people.
Exactly.
You know, for basic reasons, the spells and the creatures were better.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know, I like drafting mono black in that set as well. If you could get it.
If you could get mono black, that was really good as well. But black white with a couple Rise to Glories and all the enchantment stuff, it was over, you know?
Yeah, if you could get some enchantments to go with Rise to Glories, if you could make Heliod's Pilgrim a good card.
Yep.
Which, you know, the all of the like black enchantment removal.
Yeah.
If you had like 1 or 2 of those in your deck, it made it great.
Yeah, exactly.
Blue and red had some role players in it, but they just weren't as good.
And blue and white, you could do it because of the staggering.
And if you had white in your deck.
Yeah, because you could do it, exactly.
And your main boy, Staggering Insight, you were about to mention.
Staggering Insight. If you had that where you drew cards.
And a flyer.
Exactly.
That was the combo.
Then that was really hard to beat. But yeah, no, exactly. It seems like, you know, you play enough of these formats recently and you really get to know them, and it's not as fun.
Yeah, and that's the real heartbreaker for me.
Yeah.
Like the part of the reason that Innistrad's such a legendary set.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, there was kind of like a silver age of draft.
Fair, yeah.
That ended with Innistrad. And the reason it was a silver age was because it wasn't gold. There were definite dips.
Right.
But there were a number of just fantastic draft formats in those years before Innistrad, and including Innistrad.
Right.
And the thing that was like, well, I lost my train a bit there. Darn it! That's what we were talking about just before that.
So we were talking about recent draft formats.
Oh, colors, of course.
Yeah,
Sorry.
colors, yeah.
The thing that was awesome about Innistrad, the 2 things. One, you could basically draft all of the supported color combinations,
right.
And if you got the deck, it would be great. 2, they went that whole draft period.
Right.
And, you know, draft periods are 3 or 4 months. Between the set's release and the release of the next set.
Right.
And about a month before, maybe a little bit more, my timeline might be off, they discovered a new deck.
Oh, that's really cool. That's so cool.
It was a self-mill deck. And not only did they discover a new deck, it was the best deck.
Wow, I love that. I love that.
And that is mind-blowing.
Yeah, that's really cool.
That's something that I don't know if it's happened in draft format since. And it was great because it relied on a couple of choice on commons.
Right.
and if you could get those, it would work. It would basically it had some stipulations.
Right.
You had to be the guy at the table drafting it.
Okay.
But if you got a couple, but basically just because of the uncommon thing,
Right.
you had to find spider spawning was a really, really vital uncommon,
right.
and then there were a couple other uncommons that'd be helpful too. But if you got 2 spider spawnings, you could basically just sit at the table taking cards nobody else was interested in, and your deck would stomp.
Wow.
It was huge fun. I've drafted it. I tried to draft it once or twice in real life, and then I've drafted it a couple times really successfully on Magic Online.
Magic Online, nice. Nice, man.
And it was so much fun.
That's awesome. And it's just a surprise, right? It's that
Yeah.
element of surprise.
That feeling of being in a living format.
Yeah.
These days it feels like people manage to solve formats super fast.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is because of the way the internet works now.
Totally.
But part of it's just how they're designing the cards.
It's true, yeah.
So what formats did you really draft? What are the ones you've gone ham on? You've obviously gone ham on
Shadowmoor. What's the Zendikar I drafted a ton of. Zendikar was really fun. I liked Zendikar.
Yep. Original Zendikar.
Original Zendikar. Yep. Yeah, that was fun. That was cool.
One of the fastest, if not the fastest format of all time.
Yeah, exactly. So I drafted a bunch of that, and that was cool. I just like the cards. I think the cards effects were really interesting. They introduced a bunch of new mechanics.
Totally.
And it was extremely fast, but it was cool. I also drafted a ton of Shadowmoor and Eventide. And those were okay, but I was still learning then, so I didn't really know how to draft properly.
Totally.
At that point, so that was difficult. And then I drafted a lot of the Alaras as well. I did like sealed or stuff with Alara. So that was, I think those were the big ones for me. I think my favorite was still Zendikar.
What about more recent stuff?
More recent stuff, the ones I've drafted, Theros Beyond Death, second most, Core Set, the new Core Set.
M11.
Yeah.
M21.
M21. Oh, man. I do remember M11. That's crazy.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. M21. And that was fun. But once again, that was actually a less fun than even Zendikar Rising because it was so fast. And unlike Zendikar, there wasn't as much cool stuff going on. And then also, one of my favorites recently that I didn't draft as much because I wasn't doing draft at this point. You were more doing the draft of this on Arena, I remember. And then in person was... I can't believe
Throne of Eldraine.
Throne of Eldraine, exactly. That one is actually really fun to draft. I enjoyed that one.
That was a good format.
Yeah. I felt there were multiple decks that worked in that one.
There were multiple decks that worked, and that was... in the olden timey days, we used to understand that there were sort of different types of draft format.
Right.
And that was a much more classic sort of card management format. So the games go longer.
Yeah.
And partly because of that, the thing that's deciding a lot of games is what your cards do and how they get you more cards.
Right.
So you're looking a lot at things that give you 2-for-1s or things that generate additional stuff from ways of getting value out of the game.
Right.
And a lot less about just trying to do damage to your opponent.
Makes sense, yeah.
So do you remember any decks from that format?
Yeah, I remember the Sacrifice deck, of course.
Yeah.
So I think it was black-green, maybe? Was it black-green? Or is it black... No, it's black... Is it black-red? I can't quite remember.
Black-red is usually the Sacrifice colors.
Black-red is usually Sacrifice, yeah.
You could, depending on your definition of Sacrifice, you could call it black-green in that format too.
For sure. Food... black-green food, I remember. We drafted a couple times. Then there's blue-black, I remember. Blue-black with the rogues.
Yep,
yeah,
totally.
That was totally good. And then, what were some of the others? Because I didn't play it as much. But, Knights. You could do Knights.
Of course.
Yes, Tribal Knights, which was super fun. And that was multiple colors.
Yes, that covered at most white, black, and red.
Yeah.
Usually people split between 2 colors.
Yeah, exactly. That was really effective, if I remember. There's some really good Knights.
So some people tried to play mono white. They had that... I forget the name of the ability, but basically you got a reward if you paid 3 of the same mana for it.
That's right, yeah.
So people tried different monocolored decks in the format. Blue and green were very strong colors.
Yeah.
So those formed sort of the backbone of the format. And again, a lot of formats these days have just lopsided pies.
Right.
Lopsided color pies.
Right.
which is interesting.
Yeah. But even in Eldraine, you could still, say, run like a red-white knight deck.
Totally.
You know? And you could still win with
yeah.
which I like. And that hasn't been the case for me with these new formats.
I mean, in M21, green just is so good.
Yeah.
You know, and partly it's the... I've been talking to Janine a little bit about how to draft. She wants to be a better drafter.
Right.
And I sort of broke down drafting to be, you know, your first kind of skill is just knowing the cards.
Right.
And then your second skill is knowing which cards are good and which cards are bad.
Right.
You have to answer those two questions.
Yeah, exactly.
And then your third skill is actually judging the meta game of the draft.
Right.
So by the meta of the draft, I mean which decks are available in the draft.
Right.
Is there a good +1/+1 counters deck?
Right.
Is this color good? Is that color bad?
Right.
And then the final skill is actual draft skills.
Right.
It's by far the hardest level, and it's also the level that should definitely be treated last.
Right.
But your ability to read signals in packs,
Right.
your ability to make decisions throughout the draft beyond the other three levels.
Right. And that's incredibly important. If we probably should wrap up, but
of course.
One thing you taught me is like how to pivot.
Yeah.
In a draft. So if you start out with something and it looks really good, but the cards aren't just coming for that particular archetype or that particular color, you gotta pivot.
Yep.
Outside of that and cut your losses and go with something else.
There are times in a draft where it's early on, you pick a couple good cards and then it dries up.
Yeah.
And you are at a decision moment.
Yeah.
Where you have to figure out what's good,
yeah,
what you're gonna do,
whether
you're gonna stick with your plan or whether you're gonna pivot.
Right.
And that is a real challenge in terms of your draft skill. And for new players, don't do that.
Yeah.
If you've made some good picks early on,
just stick it out. Yeah.
Stick with it. See what happens.
Yeah. Exactly. Learn how to do it.
But because the only way you can pivot properly is if you're remembering the cards that came in the packs before, and if you're reading the signals that have been sent through the draft.
No, exactly.
I was actually just musing about this earlier today.
Yeah.
Of course, that in draft, even if because I was thinking, we're drafting with bots.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you would get draft signals if the players at your table literally took random cards.
Right.
And part of the reason I know that is because I've drafted with a lot of new players.
Yeah.
And oh man, they just take random cards.
Right, absolutely.
They don't know what's good and they don't know what's bad.
No, exactly.
So they're just picking random cards out of packs. And every time that happens, your solution is always to ignore the fourth rule of drafting and always go back to your major three.
Yeah.
Checking good and bad cards. Knowing all the cards, checking good and bad cards,
exactly,
and then checking actually how the metagame
works. Totally. I was thinking that
it's just gonna fuck your signals otherwise.
One last thought is that when it opens up again, it'd be fun to sort of do with you is we practice the draft on Arena, get to know all the cards, and then go in real life. Kind of once we've gotten familiar with the cards, that might be kind of fun to do.
No, Arena is solid for practicing drafts.
Yeah, exactly.
And it would be nice to see some more human beings.
That's right.
All right, buddy. What are you thinking about Magic for the future? Like, what do you think about your relation with the game? Looking back 5 years from now, what do you think you're gonna...
Absolutely. So I want to see if I definitely want to keep playing and stuff like that. I want to see there's some formats that I'd like to try.
Totally.
And I kind of want to build like really interesting, cool decks and just have them.
Yep.
I think that's what I want to do going forward.
Totally.
How about you, man?
Oh man, there was a time where I thought I would just sort of give up Magic at a certain point.
Yeah.
But at this point, I think I'm probably in for the long run.
Yeah.
I would really like some physical Magic cards. I would like to move into some of the oldest cards.
Yeah.
The format that I like the most, the constructed format that I liked the most for a long time was Vintage. I haven't checked back in to see what happened since the lore spannings.
Right.
For a tiny bit of vintage lore for you.
Yes.
When they released companions.
Right.
they broke numerous formats until they errated them.
Figured out how to fix them.
Including Vintage.
That's amazing.
Because there's a card called Luris, which is a 3-mana 3/2 lifelink, and you play it, and it allows you to play converted mana cost 2 or less permanents from your graveyard, 1 per turn. A Black Lotus costs less than 2, in case you haven't noticed.
Yeah.
So the card was just broken.
Yeah.
The whole mechanic was broken.
Yeah.
And it obliterated Vintage.
Because they started in your hand.
Because they started in
there
your
was
hand.
an 8th card.
You
for
literally
free.
started the game with 8 cards, and your opponent, the huge issue was your opponent, if they wanted to put a card into your deck that counted your companion, they had to dedicate minimum 4 slots to it, and there was no guarantee of being their opening hand.
Exactly.
So yeah, they fucked that up, and in response, they nerfed companions so badly that they're now garbage.
Yeah. Well, they're still playing standard, but
yeah, I mean, they're just played because they're bonus cards.
yeah, exactly. It's not the same. Definitely, it's not the same. And more often than not, I'm not playing my companion.
Yeah. All right, buddy.
All right, thanks, bro. This was a good one. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I gave all my things for the future. I want to keep playing Magic.
Yeah.
I want to get into some deeper formats.
Same. You can build some fun decks, you know.
And I want to draft in person with 8 people.
8. That'd be nice.
Including me.
Yes.
Peace out, dude.
All right. Peace out, man.